Seeing quorum, let's get this evening started. Thank you everyone for your patience this evening as we were in camera a few minutes longer than expected. I would now like to call the June 13th, 2023 Committee of the Whole public meeting to order. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded Algonquin homelands. I would like to thank the past, the present, and the future people of the Algonquin nations for the use of this land. And I would also like to acknowledge in particular this month, the importance of listening to their voices, the Indigenous peoples of this land. And I would like to speak on behalf of the board to say that their voices are respected here around this table. So now we'll move on to declarations of interest. If anyone has one to declare, please do so now. If you do have any, I would like to remind you to share those declarations in writing with board services immediately following this meeting. Now on to the approval of the agenda. Can I call for a mover to approve the agenda? Thank you, Trustee Kaplan-Murth. Does anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda? Great, that is carried. Just right before, there was one other thing I wanted to mention before we move on to the briefing from the chair, is that this may be one of our last CAL meetings for this school year. And so I also want to extend my appreciation to all of the volunteers who continue to show up for the well-being of students. So with that, I will now pass it over to Chair Lyra Evans to provide the briefing.
Thank you. From July 11th to August 10th, the Ottawa Community Immigrant Services Organization, OCSO, is offering a 10-week mental health promotion program called STRONG. The program for immigrant and refugee youth aims to build resilience and address psychological distress associated with the newcomer experience. The program is led by OCSO's clinical counselors and youth facilitators. Registration information is shared in last week's parent update. Second, this summer, the OCDSB is partnering with the NAC for a 7-week writing and performance workshop series for Indigenous and Black youth who are going into grades 6 to 9. Based on Indigenous philosophies and cultural teachings of hip hop, this workshop series creates space and mentorship for, storytelling through poetry, music, and performative art. Participants will join artists and facilitator Zoe Roy, drawing on each young person's existing knowledge. We're giving them tools to express themselves in ways that they find inspiring, empowering, and motivating. Registration details will be shared with students and families. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chair Lyra. Seeing no questions on that report, I will now pass it over to our Education Director, Giroux.
Thank you very much. As we approach the midpoint of June, we are actively engaged in schools and in the district with end-of-year assessments, activities, and celebrations. And for families, encourage them to follow school-based communications for that information. Last week, I had the opportunity to attend the Black Youth Forum, which is a student-organized event, an amazing opportunity to watch the students in a full day of learning around celebrating Black joy. So congratulations to those students and staff for that work. I also had the pleasure of attending the National Arts Center for the Cappies Gala this Sunday. This was the first event since 2019 and an opportunity to see our students engage. And we often think about students in performances in terms of the actors and dancers. But the great thing about the Cappies is it celebrates the lighting and sets and designs and critics and all of the component parts, creative, marketing, etc. And just really great to see the kind of programming that's available to support students. So congratulations to all of the dedicated staff who were involved in that and all of the students who participated. Also wanted to mention that earlier this spring, the OCDSB conducted a school climate survey that was to parents, caregivers, and educators. These surveys are done on a cyclical basis to gather information about experiences in school, particularly in the areas of engagement, environment, safety, and well-being. More than 8,700 parents and caregivers and 2,100 school-based staff completed the surveys. There are highlights about the surveys on our website, and we will be using this information and working with schools to use their school level reports to do some school climate planning activities in the fall in their school sites. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Education Director. Seeing no questions for our director, it is now time to move on to delegations. So I would like to begin by thanking those who have come to delegate. And I would like to remind all of you that will be delegating that while many of these issues that we discuss here can provoke strong views and responses, it is really important that we remain respectful and considerate to each other. I, as a chair, have been known to give an extra 5 to 10 seconds on the 2-minute clock. But after that, I will have to stop your delegation because I believe that every one of our delegates this evening has 2 minutes. And with that, I would like to invite up Andrea Chandler, re-meetings with the Ottawa Police. And you are online, Andrea Chandler.
Yes.
I will, if all is well on your end, I will start the clock now and over to you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Andrea Chandler, and I'm a resident of Capitol Ward. I'm the mom of 2 children who've attended OCDSB schools. The youngest is finishing his secondary schooling now. I wanted to declare my support for the Board of Trustees process for adopting a policy to set limits on the presence of uniformed police within public schools. My understanding is that there was a fulsome consultation and debate on this policy, which was duly adopted by the Board of Trustees. I believe that policies can always be subject to debate and revision, but such revisions should be initiated using the democratic process, such as writing to one school board trustee or requesting to make a public delegation. I consider it inappropriate for individuals who are in a position of public trust to use Twitter in order to try to pressure the Board of Trustees to reverse their decision. Those individuals should not, in my opinion, be using their powers to undermine a democratically elected board, especially during a time in the Ottawa education system that has already been very difficult. I would just like to add that I don't really understand why members of the police would need to appear in uniform in schools when they're not on urgent police business. As a parent, I often volunteered in my kids' schools when they were younger, and I didn't wear the clothes I would wear to practice my profession. I wore clothes to keep warm in the playground in winter, and that I didn't mind getting splashed with paint or glue. So I don't understand the purpose it serves to wear a uniform in a context where the person is not present in a professional capacity, but is visiting as a parent or community member. Finally, I would just like to thank those who were present on Broadview Avenue last week to stand up for transgender and non-binary identifying students and who protected students from being exposed to hateful messages at their schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea Chandler. Now this is the opportunity where up to three questions can be asked. Although I think we may have just lost you. Are there any questions?
I'm still here. I just
Okay,
muted
great.
myself.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'll thank you again for your delegation. Next, we have Robin Brown read the meetings of with Ottawa Police Service. Good evening, Robin. As I mentioned, you'll have 2 minutes for your delegation. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. The 613-819 Block Hub opposes Trustee Blackburn's motion that she will table later in this meeting. As we see it, is yet another attempt to bring back the school resource officer program or some similar program to get costs back in schools. The board ended the SRO program in 2021 after it did a human rights-based evaluation that found that police in schools have traumatic effects on students' emotional well-being, especially students who are members of groups who are disproportionately the victims of police violence, like Black, Indigenous, Middle Eastern, and LGBTQ students. The board apologized to students for the harm caused by the SRO program and should stand by that apology, especially since evidence shows little appears to have changed and the police continue to harm people. In May last year, the OPS responded to a call from an Orleans high school about students protesting the school dress code. While the cameras rolled, the OPS officers aggressively arrested a student despite the video showing the student apparently doing nothing wrong. A day before that student protest, the OPS released its use of force data showing OPS officers use force disproportionately against Black, Middle Eastern, and Indigenous people. In 2020, they used force against Black folks 4.8 times more than expected. And 1 year later, in 2021, they used force against Black folks 4.3 times more. So are we just to accept the OPS line that these things take time and let them back into school so they can use force disproportionately on Black, Middle Eastern, and Indigenous students? The OPS says police are needed in schools to build relationships with students by educating them about policing. However, the board's human rights-based evaluation found absolutely no evidence that the SRO program led to relationship building. And if education is the goal, the board should expand its curriculum to include how North American police forces were created to catch runaway slaves and clear Indigenous people off their land. We urge the board to continue centering the voices of students whose safety and well-being are most vulnerable in its efforts to create a safe, equitable, and welcoming space for all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin Brown. Are there any questions for Robin before he sits down? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Windsor.
My hand is up.
Oh. Can you tell me the name of the person whose hand is up?
Suzanne Lyon, pick.
Oh, great. Thank you, Suzanne. I can't actually see your hand up, unfortunately, so thank you for speaking up.
Sorry to
Suzanne, go
interrupt.
ahead.
Thank you very much. And through you, Chair, I would like to simply thank the speaker for his presentation and for sharing these statistics with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. Normally, I will remind people that it is a time for questions, but it's hard for me to say no to gratitude.
Apologies.
So now we will move on to Windsor Estimi. This is regarding meetings with the Ottawa Police Service. Thank you very much for your delegation. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Merci de m'avoir donné l'occasion de comparaître devant le comité aujourd'hui. Et un merci spécial à vous ainsi qu'à tous les autres membres du comité pour votre engagement à l'éducation de nos enfants. Votre contribution est importante et est appréciée. Madam Chair, our school community is dynamic and culturally rich. Our diversity, common values, beliefs, and basic principles of listening to and caring for each other, fairness, and openness should remain the key pillars that support and define interactions we should have on our school premises to better serve and protect the health and safety of our kids and school staff. Indeed, Madam Chair, our policies and procedures should fairly and accurately reflect that rich and vibrant community for the benefit of our kids, particularly the most vulnerable ones. Our policy development and implementation processes should be evergreen, open, and allow me to insist, Madam Chair, evidence-based. Data from the last OCDSB school climate surveys show that almost 25% of parents and caregivers report that their child feels unsafe at school. 40% of parents, caregivers reported that their child experienced bullying at school. And 70% of educators reported that bullying was brought to their attention 4 weeks before that survey that was conducted in March. Madam Chair, we need to continue to work together as the health and safety of our students and staff remain the utmost priority. As such, I am pleased to put my support beyond the motion moved by Trustee Blackburn. As a community, I truly believe that we could win if the committees pass that motion that would allow the Director of Education to engage with law enforcement to establish new, innovative, and culturally sensitive standards of practice.
Thank you.
that
Thank you. Thank you.
frame
Thank
police
you
intervention.
for
Thank you.
wrapping up. You're a
Thank
little
you,
over
Madam Chair.
time. Thank you very much for your delegation. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, we will now move on to May Mason regarding meetings with the Ottawa Police Service.
Hello.
Hello, May. We can hear you now. Please go ahead with your delegation. You'll have 2 minutes to delegate. Thank you.
Hello, my name is May. I use they, them pronouns, and I am speaking on behalf of ASILU Collective. In 2020, our collective first shared with the board how removing police from schools would support OCDSB's commitment to equitable and anti-racist schools. Trustees then voted to review the SRO program, and after considerable community consultations, OCDSB's Human Rights Department's review affirmed what we knew from the beginning. According to your report, police harmed racialized, migrant, disabled, queer, and trans students' opportunities to learn, to succeed, and to belong. To have such a careful investment, meaning this 8-month-long process that cost a lot of staff and community members' time and public funds, questioned every year, is nonsensical and wasteful. Moreover, the review's recommendations were actualized by a majority board vote, and police involvement was simply reduced to the provincial mandate. So what further evaluation has been done since 2021 that warrants revision to and backtracking on these recommendations? The motion presented today is reminiscent of one presented in May of 2022, which did not make it past the COW meeting. The vague language used in this motion, just like the one from last spring, makes it unclear what is being proposed exactly, especially since police presence in schools and a formal board and Ottawa police relationship has not actually ceased. I commend trustees and board staff who are part of the SRO review process. Much care was dedicated to your consideration of the important issue at hand. Thank you so much. To new trustees and board staff, please read the review of police in schools by your Human Rights Department. The community generously and graciously gave hours of their time during the consultations, and I believe you owe them your time in return by reading the pages their experiences have filled. Let's not repeat work we have already accomplished together just 2 short years ago. Please stay true to the Human Rights Review. Thank you.
Thank you, May Mason. Do we have any questions for the delegate? See no questions for the delegate. We'll move on to our last delegate, Leslie Ford, who will be speaking on National Indigenous Peoples Day. Leslie, are you online? Leslie Ford, are you online?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, when you're ready to delegate, you will have 2 minutes. Over to you. Over to you to begin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
As soon as you're ready.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm a parent and community member and a teacher in the OCDSB. June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day, a day to recognize and celebrate the history, brilliance, and diversity of First Peoples, Inuit, and Métis across Turtle Island. However, in the current 2022-23 OCDSB calendar is identified as an exam day for secondary school students. This year, some secondary schools, and not all, communicated to teachers and to students and families that Indigenous students may or may not be at school June 21st, so that was a choice. The schools were to note the following: that students may or may not be absent that day, that Indigenous self-identification is a confidential process. Students are not required to self-identify nor to observe the day. Students may or may not indicate in advance that they would be there, and school staff should not make any assumptions about their identity should someone be absent. This may put Indigenous students and families in another stressful situation. We have forced them to either have their students write the exam on the 21st and miss an important community celebration, or miss their exam and risk having to self-identify an historically and sometimes currently unsafe institution. I propose that June 21st be a school day where it's excluded from all secondary exam schedules going forward, so the Indigenous students and families are free to be in communities to celebrate. And also, non-Indigenous students and families can celebrate by attending the many summer solstice community celebration. June 21st could be a school day where schools can participate meaningfully in celebrating this day with communities and partners, and this day be protected within the OCDSB. We have an opportunity here to show that we value and are listening to Indigenous students, families, and communities by making room to celebrate and celebrate together. This just might look like reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie Ford, for your delegation. I'm not seeing any hands up, but again, I thank you for bringing this issue.
I'm sorry, Chair, I have my hand up again. It's Suzanne. And it's a
Okay,
question.
Okay, a question for clarification. Suzanne, over to you.
Yes, a question for clarification. Thank you. And through you, thank you for that delegation. I support the idea. I would like to ask board staff if the calendar for next year has already been set and if this is something that can be considered for the next school year. I think it's a great idea. And that's my question. Can it be implemented next year or would it have to wait another year? Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne Lyon, for that question of clarification. However, normally it's questions of clarification for the delegate themselves, but in this case, I will pass it over to the director.
Thank you.
Through you, the school year calendar for next year has been set, and I believe that this date is a start date on our calendar. Is that correct?
At present, it is not.
It's not a start date. Okay. So something that we could look at going forward after that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Leslie Ford. Actually, I believe we have Seema Lamba with a question for clarification for the delegate.
I do. It is a question. You had said, I think that some schools were doing something and some schools were not. Can you explain to us the process that you undertook in trying to inform the school about this and some of the maybe the reactions you got? I wasn't clear on what that was. Thank you.
So I'm a teacher, and so I can't be critical of another school, so I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. I can tell you that what I read to you was what we received at our school, and I can tell you that colleagues in other schools that I won't mention in this situation received no instruction as to students possibly being absent that day and that they should make allowances for that. There was no instruction. So that's all I can tell you. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, it does. So basically there is no instructions and it's in like less than a week. So students are basically on their own is what I'm hearing from you.
Well, and also staff, like teachers, want the best for students, but in order for them to do their own planning as far as summatives and exams, they need that information a long way ahead of time. And so we have students and, and families needing to know that that's an option for them to, of course, celebrate that day, and also teachers to be instructed as to how to support students and families in order for that not to be stressful for anybody, just to be clear and supportive of this communities rather.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I will pass it over to our education director.
I don't want to speak off the top of my head, but I know that we have had messaging in our employee newsletters and in our parent communications about the date, and that we do have a regular practice about the date and making sure that staff are aware that students can attend. I'm happy to share that information that's been shared with the board and follow up. I'd have to go back and look at it in particular.
And with that, our delegations have ended, and now we will move on to matters for action. Just a reminder to everyone around the table. Well, actually, I probably don't need to even remind people. We have a lot of really important work on the agenda this evening for action. So with that, I will call upon Director Giroux to introduce the special education plan for 2022 to 2023.
I'll be brief in my introduction to say that this is an annual activity. It's called a plan under the ministry directive. It's a bit more of a report, and Superintendent Simmons and Principal Stout are here to provide an overview to you and to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So as the director mentioned, this is an annual review that we do through SEAC over the course of our 10 months together, getting together to review each of the standards. It has become an iterative process where we continually refine and revisit things in our efforts to communicate with the clearly with the community and make things more readable. So this, I'm very pleased to say, has gotten better and better every year, thanks to that work that System Principal Stout has led with the SEAC, with the Special Education Advisory Committee. There is a requirement for SEAC to review the Spec Ed plan annually, and then a requirement for the board to approve the Spec Ed plan annually. I'll get System Principal Stout to talk about one of the unique things that's happening this year in relation to having the Spec Ed report as well. So she'll highlight that. But in a nutshell, this is a description of special education programs and services. Having gone through many months of soliciting feedback through SEAC, at this point, there's very little time for substantive changes, but we would be pleased to take them under consideration for moving forward if there are things that trustees have specific questions about. At the end of the report, you will note that there is a motion, and we will be hoping that trustees will put the motion on the floor and vote for both of them when we're done. But just to highlight some of the key changes and give a little bit more information, I'll turn it over to System Principal Stout.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. As was mentioned, there are two pieces for you to review this evening. There's the special education plan, which is the annual review. It's a fulsome report. It's quite lengthy. And then there is the special education report. The special education report is a summary of the provisions of the school board for special education, and it is done every 2 years, and it is indeed meant to be a summary of the more fulsome plan. As was mentioned, it has been reviewed at SEAC through our monthly meetings, as well as there's been independent review requested of the SEAC members. And so I'll just highlight a few key pieces for you of from the plan this year for your just to kind of share some of the key changes. So last year we started a moving forward piece within the document from for each standard. So we've maintained that and updated it this year for your review, so you have an idea of what has happened, but also what will be coming forward, we're hoping, in the next annual school year. Some other significant changes in the plan, looking at the early identification procedures and interventions strategy standard. So in that, we took a really close look to try to make sure that it was more streamlined read and a little bit more accessible for families as they're trying to understand how to receive and look at those early interventions. The second one I'll highlight for you is that we did provide and create a flow chart through the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee process and appeals standard to enable families to have a visual picture of what that process is. It can be quite difficult to navigate your way through, and so we want to provide an opportunity for families to be able to see it in that way. The third one I'll highlight for you is an update to the equipment standard, which will reflect a bit more completely the expenditures and reimbursements from the special equipment amount. And then lastly, in the board consultation process standard, we've highlighted 5 key initiatives that Learning Support Services has undergone this year. Very briefly, that includes the Learning Support Services Guide, which is an online resource for educators. We launched that back in September, and we are looking forward to create an online resource for families to be better able to access information about special education in the coming year. Secondly, I'll highlight the exploratory analysis of special education processes and pathways that we've been undergoing. Thirdly, we've been in the process of an evaluation of the programs and services at Crystal Bay Center for Special Education and Clifford Bowie Public School that is ongoing. We also have started a general learning program inclusion project that we received special grant funding for this past fall. And we continue to see that work through the end of August of this year. And lastly, we underwent educational assistant allocation audit last spring, and we continue to work with that organization to help us implement changes to the EA allocation process.
We're happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you both for the report. I have Trustee Scott and Trustee Kaplan-Murth and Trustee Lyra on the roll. Over to you, Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I would like to express my appreciation for all of the work that has gone into improving the special education plan in particular on an annual basis. I would be happy to move the both parts of the recommendation with one tiny thing, because I did highlight a need for a small correction to the years in one item in the table of contents in the special education plan. And I see that is not yet done in the copy that is attached here tonight. So with that very minor correction in the plan, which I had previously informed staff about.
Trustee Scott, is that an editorial? Is that an editorial issue, or is it a substantive issue?
It's an editorial issue. The table of contents refers to the list of trustees from 2019-20, and the actual page is indeed for the trustees from 2022-2023. So I'm moving the recommendations with that small correction.
Great. Did you want any introduction?
None required. I think staff have done a great job on this.
Okay, great. So with that, over to you, Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. I was prepared to also move to accept the plan and the report. I also wanted to thank the staff for this work. And I think in follow-up to our discussion last night, I think it's also important that we think about the plan in terms of what we would want for our EA allocations if we had a more or a less limited budget, I'll say, rather than an unlimited budget. So I would ask that when we prepare this for next year, if we can also think about that so that we can set our goals high in terms of what we need for our students, even if it isn't something that we'll get. I think we should put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra.
So I've only got one question, but it's got a bit of a premise. You talked a great deal about the importance of inclusive classrooms, about having students in the regular class and having the supports be there to support them. I'm aware that our coterminous board has entirely students supported in the classroom. They don't have congregated classes or specialized classes. I see you making the head gesture. Is my information incorrect? Okay. Well, they tout that they do not have a specialized classes. So my question is that a better model? Is that something we should be looking to emulate, or is our model better? And how do you make that determination? How do you define better, I suppose would be one of the questions.
Chair, this might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but we're in the process of going through all of that right now. We certainly think that what we have right now is enough for us to engage in a deeper understanding of what makes effective special education programs and services for kids. When we think about special education programming as a service, not as a destination, it kind of shifts how we view our approach to special education. In all likelihood, there are benefits to both models. And what I think probably would make the most sense, not having done the depth of analysis that you are asking for to really be definitive, is likely a continuum of programs and services from fully self-contained special education classrooms to regular class support with monitoring and having the resources and supports in those classrooms. We are engaged in some research. Assistant Principal Stout mentioned the GLP Inclusion Project. Those of you who are around several years ago know that we started a project at a high school around a partially integrated general learning program. And we continue to learn and find ways to help students find success in inclusive environments that appear to be in line with research that we're aware of at this given time. So I can appreciate the feeling might be that I talked around your question a little bit, but I do think it is something that is worth deeper exploration on all fronts.
So I'm not going to comment on the cop-outedness of your answer, but I will say that we currently have a continuum of services. We currently offer everything between, as you said, fully integrated classes and monitoring in the regular classroom. So how is that different from the model that is the alternative model? Because the question is, do we adopt the model that other districts have where they've gone full integration, and how do we make that determination?
Before the superintendent answers, I just want to say this. I don't think it's a question of better or worse model. And I think the superintendent's done a great job of that. But I think in terms of the board's work, when we look later at the strategic plan that we're presenting, and we think about program reviews, what we need to be thinking about in the context of program reviews and in special education is an inclusive design approach to education. And so that's a conversation that you're going to have an opportunity to have next year and over the course of the program review process. And that's the space where I think this board can engage in more meaningful conversations about the delivery of special education programming and what that continuum looks like and how our program delivery model supports that in the broader context. So I just wanted to bring us back to where you will have a space for this kind of conversation going forward with the priorities that you're setting.
Thank you, Director. Trustee Evans.
So I guess my next question is, what metrics do we have to determine program efficacy, and what will we be using to make the determinations that we've spoken about? What are our KPIs? What are our numbers? What data do we collect, and how will we use it?
Chair, through you. So there will be a variety of data methods depending on the actual goal of what it is we're trying to accomplish in a program review. But typically what we have done is jurisdictional scans, literature reviews, focus groups, pathway analysis and outcome analysis of placement in this case, specialized program classes, and those kinds of things. But that will require a deeper exploration of what's involved to actually meet the questions or answer the questions that we're looking at having answered.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions. Oh, I see no other questions. I'm going to ask that Trustee Nash take over the chair role.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Through you, Chair, my question, if possible, it would be great to hear from Sue Cohen from SEAC, who I know is on the line, about any of their thoughts from yesterday's meeting, the presentation of this report. If she's not available to do so, it would be grateful for the superintendent to share some of the highlights from SEAC.
Is Sue Cohen on the line? Can you respond to Trustee Val's comment? Superintendent Simmons?
Chair, through you, if I can seek a question or get a clarification on this. You mean in relation to the special education plan?
Yes, I am, with regards to the special education plan, what were some of the highlights that were raised from the committee?
I'm not sure I have the answer you're looking for. The committee has been going through this every month since September. And every month there are comments and suggestions around clarification, explanation, things that we can shift. So things like the introduction of a flow chart, I think, was a comment that came directly through SEAC as a suggestion to help make the plan more readable for our community. So those kinds of comments happened all along and are captured in the minutes that are submitted to the board every month.
Thank you, Superintendent Simmons. I was wondering if there were any particular issues that were raised in the report that garnered quite a bit of attention during the last SEAC meeting that you discussed the report.
Chair, I think you're referring to a conversation around de-streaming and the work that were there, but that wasn't part of the special education plan. That was a separate item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. I wasn't aware of what happened during that time, so I appreciate the response.
Do you want the chair back?
I sure do. Thank you, Trustee Nash. Great. Seeing no other questions, I'll pass it back to the mover, Trustee Lynn Scott.
And no wrap up required, Madam Chair.
Great. So now I will call the vote for the recommendation. Is it up on the screen? I'll read it out as it comes up, that the 2022-23 special education plan attached as Appendix A to the report be approved, that the 2022-23 special education report attached to Appendix B to the report number 2345 be approved. And so with that, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to agenda item 8.2, the long awaited, very excited for strategic plan, no pressure. Michelle Giroux, can you introduce the report?
Absolutely. So we're very excited to introduce the draft strategic plan for your consideration. This is, as you know, the key work of the district. And this year we made a number of changes to the process to ensure that the committee was more engaged, coming here with regular reports every month. And we undertook an extensive consultation process. Andrea will speak to that as she goes through. And I think what I would highlight is we've got a plan here that I think does a good job of capturing the feedback from the community, is built on a strong set of values and a good set of pillars. But we've been doing a lot of thinking already about implementation strategy, and we've touched a little bit on that in the report, and thinking about how we might move forward over the next year and build these conversations, not on the entire plan, but on specific initiatives into meetings over the course of the year. And so that you have more focused opportunities to go deeper in conversation. So I will invite Andrea to give a more fulsome introduction, and then we'll have an opportunity to answer questions.
Thank you, through you, Chair.
As Director Zhu mentioned, this year there have been a number of initiatives and events that have helped shape the development of the strategic plan for 2023 to 2027. So it is my pleasure to be here this evening to share the plan with you as it stands right now for your approval this evening. We did complete and discuss an environmental scan and conduct an extensive consultation through multiple avenues over the course of the year. So I do want to take this moment to acknowledge the community and the thousands of people who trusted us with their stories, who came out and participated in this consultation. And I want to acknowledge all of the hard work of the Board of Trustees and of the team for the engagement in every step along the way, and really the commitment to listening to those stories and making sure that they're reflected in the values and in the priorities for the strategic plan. The new strategic plan is informed by the current strategic plan and uses what we've learned over the past 4 years as we take this looking in the 4 years ahead. So through thoughtful reflection and discussion, the Board of Trustees and senior team shaped the mission, the values, and the priorities for the next 4 years. In early May, we shared a draft version with you. And over the course of the past month, we've gathered feedback on that draft from students, from staff, from families, and through our advisory committees. And this has led to the proposed plan that's attached as Appendix A. So the mission statement in the strategic plan is to build a learning community that provides students with equitable opportunities to reach their potential and develop into respectful, creative, and knowledgeable community members who contribute to society. When we consulted on this draft plan, we heard feedback, especially from students, about how excited they were about this new mission statement, about the clarity of purpose and the reflection of the shifting priorities of the district. The values identified in the new strategic plan are equity, inclusion, and accessibility, community building, responsible resource use, and leadership development. And while the overall sentiment of these values that are presented here mirror what we saw in the draft, we did have the opportunity to revise them based on feedback, especially from the advisory committees, to ensure that they accurately capture what we stand for as an organization and that they're worded in a way that's accessible to the broader community. Our strategic priorities that are identified are learning, well-being, and social responsibility. When we brought the draft forward in May, I highlighted that one of the things that stood out for me was how often we found ourselves revisiting the strengths of our current strategic plan and the components of that should be carried forward. And this plan evolved to consist of these 3 areas, and we received very positive response from the community when we presented these areas, particularly from staff, around the articulation of learning as being one of those 3 key pillars. Under learning, the desired outcomes identified include improved student literacy and achievement in math, and improved program quality and accessibility for all students. Under well-being, we're working toward improved student mental health supports and resources, enhanced safety for students and staff, improved employee well-being and engagement, and improved educator-student relationships. Under social responsibility, we've identified continued progress toward reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, strengthened student voice and leadership through fair and ethical decision-making, and improved environmental sustainability. Through planning sessions, key work and success criteria were explored to identify what we need to do to be successful, how we will measure progress, and how we will see impact. And an overview of this is presented on page 2 of the appendix. An important part of this work will be the development of more detailed operational plans, which will outline the implementation strategy and timelines. Much of this work will be led by the new director as they bring their knowledge and experience to the role. And some of this work will also be tied to updates from the Ministry of Education as we await guidelines and key performance indicators, particularly areas of literacy and numeracy. To support the senior team and the Board of Trustees in the ongoing measurement and monitoring, and in particular in using data to inform the setting of targets, there will be opportunities for professional learning together in the fall. And as we implement the plan, there will be annual measurement reports with updates on progress, as well as the integration of measurement on strategic priorities into our regular reporting structures. And the purpose of this reporting will be to ensure transparency and accountability and to inform resource allocation and annual action planning as we make continuous progress toward our goals. And so the recommendation that we put before you this evening is that the strategic plan 2023 to 2027 as attached as Appendix A of Report 23-051 be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Strategic Business Analyst Rahim. You've definitely lived up to your name on the strategic part. I have a list of speakers, starting with Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I'd like to move the motion on the floor, to the floor. And may I have introduction?
Yes, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I would like to say, well, has it ever been the time to introduce almost, a new board entirely, the process, and can express our appreciation for your patience and really taking our feedback into consideration. I really want to thank your thoroughness in the seriousness of community consultation. It's something that I think a lot of us find very important in a lot of these processes. And I think you guys really, Dr. Rahim and her team took it to heart and really ran with it. And so I will save any final remarks for closing and allow my colleagues to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Aziz. Next, I have Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I wanted to thank you for this amazing strategic plan. I absolutely am proud to be part of an organization that puts together a vision that supports improved access to programs for all students, that develops anti-hate and anti-oppression strategies, that continues progress towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, that looks at our environmental footprint. This is amazing. So I just want to say thank you very, very much for all of your work, and I look forward to seeing how this is operationalized.
Trustee Milburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I also want to echo my colleagues' sentiments. Thank you very much for this excellent strategic plan. I do have one question that is focused on the report back and the measurements. So I'm noticing in the report on page 4, it says that in the fall, the Board of Trustees and senior team will be part of ongoing measurement and professional development. I'm wondering if we can expand, though, on how we're planning to report back to the public and what that's going to look like. I'm sure that your team has already put lots of thought into that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. In the past, we've taken two different approaches to reporting out on the strategic plan. We've done both annual reports and we've done pieces of reports where we dig deep into a particular pillar. So, for example, we could do a report that's focused on learning and come out with a report showing all of the progress that we've made in that area, and another report on well-being. As we move forward this year, we've got important strategies in terms of reports focused on the strategic plan, in terms of a report that really lets you have a conversation around the strategies and key performance indicators identified in this plan. But as well, I want to really point out the importance of our existing reporting structures and the shift that we've been doing to make sure that the strategic priorities are reflected in those. So, for example, on the May 9th Committee of the Whole, there was a report on student achievement and pathways, and really making sure that we make the links between the reporting that we're already doing and the objectives identified in the strategic plan, so that we're not duplicating efforts or duplicating your time in meetings, but instead using the data that we're bringing forward as a way to report out on the strategic plan and building transparency that way.
Okay. Perfect. And through you, Madam Chair, just to clarify my understanding, so when we are reporting back to the public, we will be using the same reporting structure so that we can track our progress throughout the 4 years of the strategic plan easily. Am I understanding that correctly?
So there's built into the existing reporting, but then there's also the specific reports as well. And then when we communicate those updates to the public, we typically will put it in more accessible language. So it wouldn't necessarily look like a board report. They would be updates that are included in the director's annual report, which is more friendly language, less educational jargon, taking a slightly different approach tailored to that audience to include student stories, things happening in schools as qualitative evidence as well. So less of a technical report, but.
All right, perfect. And through you, Madam Chair, that's all my questions. Thank you again for all you and your team's hard work.
Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's really good to see this document, and the language in it is extremely good. And I very much appreciate that. One question that has come to me over and over again, however, talking to members of some of our advisory committees, talking to members of the public, is that when they look at this representation of our plan, they don't see the plan right away. What they see is the value statements, and they think that the value statements are the plan, and begin to propose ways that those value statements should be revised so they would be more like a plan. And so what I'm wondering is whether it would be possible in the graphic representation of the document to put the plan part, which is the page with all of the 3 pillars and the actions and expectations on it, ahead of the values statements in whatever we publish on this, so that it would be clear to anybody that, yes, this is in fact a plan of a kind that they could easily and immediately recognize as a plan.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. There are going to be multiple versions of documents to communicate this strategic plan to roll out, in particular to schools. And so, for example, for the posters that might appear on the walls of schools would have a totally different format. So the presentation of the plan that we're seeing here tonight is to be able to approve the content that's in it, where the graphical representations will look different depending on what it looks like in the wall of a school, for example. And so in that context, the learning, well-being, and social responsibility pillars would absolutely be at the front and center. So I completely agree that there's an opportunity to make sure that that structuring is done when we're communicating this to the public.
I would very much appreciate it if we could have some idea of what those representations might look like by the time that the report from this committee of the whole meeting comes to the board for final approval, simply because there seems to be still considerable confusion about what the actual plan is and how we would measure progress on it. And I really think it's important for that part, for the public in general, to be right up front. And I would like to see that it really is. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Scott. I'm actually going to turn this over to the director.
I appreciate the trustees' comments, and in fact, I like very much to see it all in one page. And there's a balance in the design work we do leading up to this stage and the design work we do coming out of this stage. And I think, you know, in terms of what we can do, recognizing how busy the end of June is for our design team, what we can do is get the entire thing onto an 11 by 17 inch page for now, but there will be a little bit more thought in terms of what the design pieces look like once we have the final language. And so we'll bring you a one pager that's easier to read and see the overview, and then we'll work on some poster pieces and other pieces once it's been formally approved.
Does that conclude your questions? Next, I have Trustee Presley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thank you as well to Trustee Scott for that, those good comments regarding the readability of the document. Dr. Heem, thank you so much to you and your team for this. I have spoken with countless constituents and community members who were so thrilled at the opportunity to provide meaningful feedback and directing our strategic plan. And I want to personally thank you for letting me slip in those last minute submissions, even though you had said, okay, we need to have all community submissions in by this date. So great job. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to voting on this.
Trustee Lyra. And actually, before you speak, I'll just name the people in order that are up next. We have Trustee Lyra, Seema Lamba, Trustee Dixon, and Suzanne Lyon.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start by saying there are parts of this strategic plan that I really like. I really like how in our value statement, we talk about equity of outcomes, and how will we see impact? We talk about seeing equity of access for various programming and making sure that people can get into the kinds of things that they will need. My primary concern with this strategic plan is the lack of numbers. So when I look at it, we see progress indicators on saying things like increased enrollment in identity-based program or in programs by identity, or school climate survey data and incident reporting. I would like to know where we're at and where we're going. I'd like to know what our goals are, because are we going to say we got one more student enrolled in an Indigenous class in 4 years than we did this year and declare that a success? I don't think that we should. And so I think that the thing that I see missing from this strategic plan is numbers that we can hold ourselves accountable to and that the public can hold us accountable to. Because this is a public document. This is sort of our promise of what we intend to accomplish over the next 4 years, the remainder of our term. And if we don't put numbers in here to say, we met this goal, we set out and we met this goal, or we were incredibly ambitious and we got real close, but we didn't quite meet that goal. I think we should have goals that we can articulate with data to back up that we've met them, because I feel like that is missing. And I don't know how we get that kind of data into the strategic plan. And if you have a comment, I would love to hear it.
I'm actually going to pass it over to the director first.
Thanks very much. I think when I talked at the beginning about bringing some reports forward, there will be for each of the major areas in this report, a need for us to come forward with a more detailed report. And when we look at like what we've mapped out in the letter of transmittal, we've talked about between September and December, bringing you a report on the math improvement plan, bringing a report on the literacy plan, and bringing a report on program review framework. Program review framework is a little bit different than the other two. But the reason I want to talk about that is because when we look at the math improvement plan as an example, we will be setting targets for students in grades 3, 6, and 9. And we will be setting targets for all students, and we will be setting targets for students in different groups of students or with different learning needs. And so it's not as simple as a number or a percentage in a particular area. And so it's hard to get a number in this document without that number being trite or a political statement more than a data-informed goal. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking about how could we and really look to that commitment to bringing you more focused in reports where we're saying, here's a math improvement plan, here's the strategy. And there are going to be very public reporting requirements on that, because our commitment to math is also tied to that ministry directive. We're only just starting to see a little bit of what those ministry expectations are, but they're very data informed and they're very public reporting. So that will be a place where you can go deep, topic by topic, rather than dropping in some numbers here. And those, when we do that, that is what will come in the reporting. So we'll be able to say, when we did the math improvement plan, this is what the target we set. And when we report on it annually, this is where we got to. And then we consolidate that over the life of the plan. So I know it doesn't get us all the way on day one, but it does give us a place where we're continuing these conversations and building our capacity.
Trustee Lyra?
I worry a little bit about moving goalposts if we don't write them into the strategic plan. I worry a little bit that we'll start next year and say, this is a target we think we can reach. And then by the end of that year, have reached it, but we might have set a less ambitious target because we wanted to make sure that we met it every year. I think the strategic plan was or is an opportunity for us to come out and really push and say, we want to set ambitious goals. We want to lead as a district in these areas. So I guess, what can we do to ensure that there isn't a moving goalposts issue when it comes to the reports if we're doing them on a year-by-year basis?
Director?
Well, I think in the context of math and literacy improvements, there is goal setting that's annual with the goals increasing every year. Again, we don't have all of the information on the ministry piece. But I think if you look, reflect back on the student achievement report that we brought earlier this spring, you'll recall that we present, you know, the current year data, but we also look at 5-year trends. And I say that because the trend data is really important in education, right? And it's easy to say from here, okay, so we want a 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever the number increase. But there are all kinds of different restrictions on what data source measures, you know, what piece of information, and it's not always the same group or the same population. What I say is setting one overall target for literacy would be very hard, I think, and I don't know if any of my colleagues want to comment on this, but it would be very hard to say, this is the percentage on literacy that we will increase overall, because I think it's a more complex measure than that.
You have a couple seconds left, Lyra.
So I'm going to go back on the list. I've got 30 seconds left. I can get both my questions in. So my second to last question is about the Bill 98 has passed and the ministry's requirements to do a reporting both at the start and end of every school year as it relates to your strategic plan, and what is our plan as it relates to that?
We haven't seen specific directives. We just received the bill today, but we can anticipate. So we have an annual reporting requirement, and the ministry has, I would say, provided increasing clarity and specifications about the annual report. Over the last 10 years, we've seen that. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that we will get even more specificity in that. So we know where that report comes because it's tied to the organizational meeting is a place where it normally comes. What we have historically done is brought some reports to committee that were more discussion focused and then reflected that data in the annual report, and we do a presentation on the annual report. So we know that part. Presumably the reporting out on where are we going comes at the start of the year. But that hasn't been a ministry requirement yet, so we'll wait and see what that direction is. As I said, we know from what little we've heard on at least math and literacy that there will be some front end requirements for communicating, and we'll have to see exactly what that looks like before we know for sure. But I think that where we go as an organization is if the board approves the plan, then our first step is making the community aware that we have a draft plan. That's our end of year announcement. And then going into the year, more messaging about this is a plan, this is our framework, this is where we build. And then we get to the targeted, this is where we're going to go deeper in conversation. And what we know about the cycle of strategic plan work is that in year one, there tends to be more go deeper in research, more conversation about, it's conceptual, right? We're trying to make progress in an area and we're going deeper and we're understanding. In years 2 and 3 of a plan, we are getting more into specific initiatives and we're getting into policy changes or decision-making, things like that come back to the board. And by the time we get to year 4 of a plan, we're more into implementation and refinement. So that's the cycle. And in those cycles, then where there's those decision points, that's other spots where the community will have opportunities to engage. There will be consultation on some of those pieces. There will be different spots. But I think the piece that's different in this plan is that idea, and hopefully an idea that the incoming director will appreciate, that over the course of the first year, we're bringing you a whole series of reports that map out how we see the work in that area for the 4-year period.
Thank you. Last question. The text that we have under the strategic plan about this being the traditional homelands of the Algonquin people, is that the text we worked out with IAC?
Please go ahead.
So that was the text that we got feedback from IAC that informed some of the components of this statement. And then it was drafted by our principal, Jody Coco, for Indigenous education. She's the one who did the final wordsmithing of putting the pieces together for us.
All right, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Seema Lamba, over to you.
Thank you. I have a question. I do like your strategic plan. It might actually be related to Trustee Scott saying the advisory committees having some questions. We have seen these nice kinds of words, but we really want to know the operationalization of it. So this is the framework is what I'm guessing. And I think we're answering it. The next stage will be to how are these individual things going to be actually operationalized? I'm going to give you an example of how it can be interpreted differently. It may look good, but my interpretation may be differently than what was intended. At ACE, we've talked about the need for increased representation of staff, both at the senior leadership level and at teacher level. Students need to see teachers reflecting them. Where would that show up on the strategic plan? I saw one line that said better representation and leadership of Indigenous and marginalized groups. Is that where it is? And is that what you were thinking? Would there be the next step on something like that piece that I just read?
Where that will show up is in the renewal of the Indigenous Human Rights and Equity Roadmap. So you recall that's a more comprehensive document that speaks to a number of a large amount of work that will be done. So if we think about that, we think about the strategic plan setting the overall direction, and then the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap setting the direction in terms of equity priorities.
Seema Lamba.
Okay, so that's helpful, because this also does say renewing, I think, somewhere around the Human Rights and Equity Roadmap and annual action plans, because it would be useful to see what's been action and what still needs to be. And are you suggesting then that roadmap will then inform everything in the strategic plan?
So the roadmap will provide an overview of the equity work that's happening under the plan. What I was speaking to earlier was the idea that we will have an opportunity with committee to talk about key areas of work. So for example, math improvement planning as a report that comes forward for discussion that sets more pieces and provides an overview of the work being done in math. A literacy action plan that speaks to the strategies being deployed to build capacity on literacy. So there may be goals in both math and literacy action plans that seek to improve results for certain groups of students who may have experienced gaps or may not be performing at the same level. So there may be targeted strategies there, but the roadmap renewal, we'll talk about the big equity work. So it might reference those, but I just want to understand that differentiation, right? So equity will be in all, is a lens in all of the pieces, but the roadmap renewal is what is the strategic work to drive equity at a higher level. I hope I've made that clear and not muddied it up.
Yeah.
Seema Lamba.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that's useful to know. I kind of share Trustee Evans' concerns about not having goalposts, right? Because you can have great strategic plans and language, but if we don't have sort of where we want to get to and we know specifically and it's more general, then there's a lot of room for interpretation. And a lot of room for actually not meeting those goals. But that's all I'll say for now. But thank you for those answers.
Next is Trustee Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Rahim, I just wanted to say thank you very much. You did listen to us on that long weekend when we had to sit in the room, and I really like that you took the points that we really stress with the students and with the public. So thank you very much for your hard work. Well done.
Suzanne Lyon.
Thank you very much, Chair, through you. Dr. Rahim, it's a wonderful strategic plan, and as previous speakers have noted, the language is accessible and clear, and I would like to echo Trustee Kaplan-Murph's comments about the values that are reflected in the plan. I'd also like to build on Trustee Lyra and Trustee Milburn's comments and questions, and as well some of the things that Seema Lambda just said. And I apologize if I didn't understand the answer earlier about reporting, but will there be an annual standard report on the key elements of the strategic plan that can be compared year to year so that progress can be measured? I would also like to say that I think hard targets and numbers are important. We do need more detailed goals so we can measure our progress going along. And if you can't measure progress, you can't see where the gaps are and how to improve going forward. I also wonder, we've been doing this for a long time. OCDSB is not a new board. There must be a history of data and performance and goals and measures and things that can be tracked so that we can actually have a longer term view of where we came from, so that we can have more clarity around where we're going. So one question I guess would be to Dr. Rahim, who I think is the head of research and analysis, perhaps, if that kind of data is available to be compared year over year and in a way that's consistent and comparable. And the last thing I wanted to say was, I guess, for Director Giroux, who mentioned during her explanation about how the strategic plan is implemented, that implementation takes place in year 4. And that surprised me a little bit, that statement. So I wonder if she could speak to that a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start off with you, and then we'll move over to the director.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The short answer to your question about an annual report is yes, absolutely. There will be a annual report on the strategic plan with an update on progress. As far as sort of the history of those reports and looking back over time, absolutely yes to that as well. In some years, we had up to 5 measurement reports on the strategic plan when we had 5 key identified areas. If we're moving forward with 3, there might be an opportunity to bring 1 or 2 reports that really narrow in on those areas. As I mentioned before, also looking to make sure that the strategic plan is integrated in existing reporting structures as well, but a final annual report that will absolutely let us track that progress year over year in sort of both a more data heavy technical report that would come to the board, as well as Director Giroux mentioned, a sort of more public facing version of that that would build the content for the director's annual report that would go out to the public to make it a bit more accessible that way as well. In response to your question about the goals, I really like to use the roadmap as an example, because if you look at our current roadmap, Indigenous Human Rights and Equity Roadmap, in it, there are some really specific goals and targets. And as we revisit that to renew that over the next period, it helps us look at where we landed in terms of those goals that were set. And so that's a really good example of the kind of operational plan that we will be using to implement this strategic plan. And so, for example, when we are looking at literacy and numeracy plans and targets that might be identified, that's the kind of model that we'd be using in terms of identifying those. So even though we don't see all of those numbers for all of those groups appearing in this document, it is something that would be informing the work. And I'll pass it over to the director for her response to your other comment.
Thanks very much. I didn't mean to suggest that nothing gets implemented in the strat plan until year 4. Maybe we should use the word, we start to operationalize the plan immediately. And the point I was trying to make was that often in year 1 of the plan, much of that work is around research and best practice. There might be some reporting on that and talking about that. And we make decisions throughout, but where there are initiatives that are driving big change, we tend to see those happen in years 3 and 4. So if we think about program reviews, for example, there's a cycle of work there before we get to the actual implementation of changes. That's probably later in the plan because they're big decisions and big consultation. But absolutely, there are lots of things throughout the 4-year cycle that will be implemented immediately. So for example, we start with professional learning. We start with, for example, in literacy, screening tools and the use of screening tools right away and the reporting on that. So it depends on the initiative, but I hope that's clear in terms of what I was referring to.
Thank you very much. That's great. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Suzanne Line. I do not have any other first-time speakers. And so I'm going to kindly ask again if Trustee Nash will take over the chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I very much appreciate the work that has gone into this. I very much appreciate the outcome. It's an incredible strategic plan, and I think it gives us a lot to work with for students. I would like to echo the comments that have been made around results reporting and targets. I know we live in Ottawa. We are the town that loves logic models. We have tons of experience on results-based management that we can draw from all over town. And so if we could look to developing some sort of results framework that has targets, I would very much appreciate that. The other point that I wanted to raise is, we'll call it a value, kindness. When we hear a story about increased bullying, when we hear stories potentially about educators and the things that they're facing, I truly believe, and what we face around this board table, kindness can be a value that drives the work we do. And I think I see it in different places, but I would love for you to speak to where you see kindness coming through your strategic plan. And then the last question, Director, probably best placed with you, is really what can we envision when the new director comes on board? This strategic plan will be finalized. How can we help to ensure that it's his, and what sort of expectations do you have around his or her ownership of that?
Director of Education, did you want to start first, or Dr. Rahim?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't think I can speak for anyone who assumes this seat, but what I can tell you is that if we have a board approved plan, I am committed to working with the new director to support that individual in one, understanding the consultation and the process and the work that went into developing the plan. Two, the thinking that we have heard from trustees and committee members around implementation. And three, the preliminary work of the senior team in terms of implementation strategy. And I think we've been clear that we need to have some strategies in place for the upcoming year so that a new director is well positioned to start the year and has a structure and process, but that we don't define that process so tightly that we preclude the director's capacity to influence and shape the implementation strategies.
And I can pick up where she left off in response to your question about kindness. And so I see it in multiple places throughout the strategic plan. I see it in the values in community building around trust and collaboration, and in leadership development. And a lot of that is really thinking about the exit outcomes and preparing students for life. And you'll see some of that reflected in social responsibility on the other side of the page, where we're talking about developing those social emotional skills for students, empathy, building relationships. I see the kindness really embedded there. And then again, in improving those life and learning skills, and kindness being a key part of that.
Trustee Bell, did you have further questions or comments?
Those are all my questions and comments. Just another internal round of applause for the great work that you've done.
And I turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. We have another first-time speaker. It's Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So I just have an observation, and I do thank you, Dr. Rahim, for all your work and to those around you. I find that the discussion around setting targets and collecting data, which is all very fine and well, but in my experience of 12 years, so this will be my fourth strategic plan and going through this, and we have a new director coming on board, which we've had in the past. And so we pass a strategic plan. We hire a director and we give them the plan, and then we ask them to implement it. But what I've noticed is those directors working with their staff come to the Board of Trustees with the plan, and then the Board of Trustees, for lack of a better word, torpedoes many of those plans. And then if the targets aren't met at the end of it, said, well, what happened? The targets didn't get met. So I would just share that piece of history with my colleagues, and that perhaps moving forward, we would consider very carefully the recommendations that staff and our new director will be bringing forward to us, and that we consider the expertise that goes behind those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn. And seeing no other speakers, I'm going to pass it over to you, Trustee Aziz, for wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. Again, echoing my thanks and highlighting the questions about reporting. I think many of us got giddy when you said data heavy reporting, unquote, when it came to our annual report. So I think my colleagues around the table are looking forward to seeing progress. And if I may graciously ask that we highlight some of the gaps too on remaining work, even in the first year. We're still working on these things. We're hoping to continue work on these things. I appreciate the little table of preliminary plans because it really helps to provide a context for the fantastic work folks are doing. So thank you again, and I'm looking forward to voting on this motion.
Thank you, Trustee Aziz. I will now call a vote for the recommendation that the strategic plan 2023-2027 attached as Appendix A of Report 23-051 be approved. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Great, that is carried. Well, it is coming on close to 2 hours. So how about we take a 10-minute break? Thanks. Well, it looks as though we have quorum and some very interesting conversations happening, but we're going to move forward to agenda item 8.2, report 23-051. Oh, no, we already finished that one. We're going to move on to agenda item 8.3, report 23-049, naming of the new elementary school. Director Giroux, can you please introduce the report?
Absolutely. I'm going to invite Superintendent Lehman to do that.
Great. Through you, Chair. I am joined this evening with Principal Janice St. Germain. Janice is the principal of our new school in Half Moon Bay, and Janice was appointed in February. So Janice has been a key contributor in working with our school naming committee and in bringing you this report this evening. So certainly Janice or I will be here to answer any questions after I provide a short introduction and overview of the report. So, excuse me, as you're maybe aware, we do have a new school that is being built in Half Moon Bay. It's at 989 Kilburnie Avenue. For those folks that are familiar with Barrhaven and familiar with the Half Moon Bay area, and it will be opening in September as a JK-5 school. So the school, it's a bit of a shift at this point. So September to December, we're going to be at Moody, and then we will move into the new school beginning in January of 2024. Approximate enrollment in the new building will be about 650 students, and it will be a dual track school. So it will be English and early French immersion. One of the key aspects and one of the key roles of a new school is the school naming process. So we followed the policy, both the policy and the procedure around naming of new schools. And part of that work is engaging a number of individuals. So one of the things that we did was engaged our equity department. We engaged our Indigenous and Human Rights department, as well as a member of the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, an Algonquin elder, and obviously, most importantly, the school community and our students. Janice was from February on, she was at Half Moon Bay Daily, engaging and with students and getting to know the students and getting to know the students that would be coming to the new Half Moon Bay School in the subsequent year. So as part of that process, in the school naming process, Janice put out for names. There were approximately 18 individuals that were part of the school naming committee. And those individuals consisted of committee members, they consisted of staff, consisted of Janice herself as the principal, the area trustee, Trustee Blackburn, as well as myself. We went out and asked for names from the community as well as students. Initially, there were 45 names that came forward, which over time were shortlisted down to 3 names, which you see in the report. Wazozan Public School, Waweti Public School, and Polaris Public School. You will also note in the report that the name Polaris Public School tended to be favored by most, and the reason was it was connected with the celestial bodies of Half Moon Bay. And so that was one of the reasonings behind it. The other reasoning was that it was easy to say. As we were working through the latter stages of the process, one of the things that we did learn was that Polaris was the name of a nuclear missile, and we certainly did not want that to be misrepresented as the name of a school. So the school naming committee debated and looked at the remaining 2 names, and the recommendation coming forward to the committee of the whole here is to name the school Wazozan, Public School. And so the representation of Wazozan is the Algonquin Anishinaabe word for nest. And certainly the committee felt that it fit really well because a nest is a safe place to nurture the young. Birds of all types and sizes and shapes begin a life in a nest. As there's a place for different kinds of birds in the natural world, there's also a place for every student in our school. And Oisozon Public School aligns with the board's strategic plan. I know we've just talked about our new strategic plan moving forward related to social responsibility and well-being, and certainly embodies care and belonging in our community. Members of the school naming committee also indicated that it was an important step towards reconciliation and selecting a name of an Algonquin background. And it was certainly a great opportunity to continue learning about Algonquin peoples that our students would be able to share with their parents and family and friends, etc. So I'm happy to be presenting this evening on behalf of the school naming committee the recommendation of Oisozon Public School at 989 Kilburney Avenue in Barrhaven, effective September 2023.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Lehman, and also thank you, Principal St. Germain. I am now going to call for a mover. Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to move the recommendation, please.
Would you like introduction?
Yes, I would, Madam Chair, and thank you for that. I'd like to thank the superintendent for his presentation, and I would like to thank all the members of the committee for giving their time to come up with this recommendation. I'd like to thank Principal St. Germain for joining us today, and I'd also like to acknowledge that Dr. Karen Martin is with us this evening. She has been appointed the vice principal, and I was beyond thrilled when these two women were appointed the administrators at this school. I've worked with them both and known them both for many years, and look forward to working with them for many more years to come. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Lana Lowton, who's the office administrator, and I just met Lana tonight, and I look forward to getting to know her very well too, like I know the other two. So with that, I would encourage my colleagues to support this recommendation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I do not see any questions or comments around the table. So with that, I will call the vote for the recommendation that the new Half Moon Bay Elementary School located in Ottawa at 989 Kilburney in Barrhaven be named Oisozon Public School effective September 2023. All those in favor? That is carried. Great. Now we're going to move on to agenda item 8.4.
Madam Chair, I'd like to raise a point of order.
Okay. Please go.
I'd like to raise an objection to the consideration of the question regarding the next item on the agenda. Based on our internal board guiding principles, policy p.048.gov, with attention to section 4.2, and the importance of aligning with our priorities in the strategic plan, I believe that discussing this motion would cause harm in a few key areas. Firstly, a motion was brought forward May 10th, 2022 that subsequently presented a highly similar question as to what is being presented tonight. The board at that time determined to temporarily dispose of it by way of indefinite postponement, which in my understanding prevents us from further discussion unless brought back to the table, as outlined in our bylaws and standing rules, as well as Curtin King. Secondly, in order for the board to invite a similar discussion, it would mean that the reasons for postponement in the past motion have been met. I believe this contravenes, I also believe this contravenes previous directives and decisions of the previous board and the decision of ending the SRO program, which directly relates to that. We were given directives and we were asked to work with police and community groups that experience discrimination and oppression, to work collectively through a process that's guided by the human rights-based approach on improving services and response and supports for youth in crisis. Over the past couple of weeks, based on the large majority of feedback we've been receiving, this, in my opinion, has not been completed to a satisfactory degree in relation to policy p.032.sco safe schools, as well as our school climate survey. Thirdly,
I believe it's not in accordance with our board bylaws and standing rules, as they are outlined in our preamble at the beginning for anyone who wants to look at it. I fear this motion will cause harm to our community partners and our community at large, as well as the perception and integrity of the board. The voices who have trusted us to advocate for them should be centered in determining the expectations of any Ottawa Police Service community partner standards of service and what they will look like inside of our institutions prior to any further action on the part of the board. So just to reiterate, I believe it will cause harm based on those things. And I believe that the communities that we represent should be offered the opportunity to provide further consultation and consideration prior to moving forward on this motion.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Which are in the original motion that was passed, which are the clauses that contravene by this new motion that's been put forth?
So in last year, May 10th, 2022, in the committee of the whole meeting, this motion was postponed indefinitely. And one of the provisions for the postponement was that we had ongoing work to be done. Excuse me about the wording, but there was ongoing initiatives in terms of creating a larger forum for community feedback, including.
Thank you, Trustee Petzley. I'm actually just going to ask which are the specific clauses in the original motion that you are noting have been that are in conflict with the motion that will be presented.
So, based on our bylaws and standing rules in the preamble, states point B, the board is committed to providing leadership and good governance to benefit public education and is mindful of the impact of its decisions on individual communities and society at large. Point D, the board shall maintain a strategic focus on the work of the district and shall govern with long-term vision. As well as in our board guiding principles, if we look at specifically section 4.0, D, consider the input of students, parents, staff, and the wider community as appropriate through a meaningful consultation process. E, make efficient, effective, and innovative use of its resources based on sound planning and best available information. And F, foster vital and mutually beneficial relationships between schools, the populations they serve, and the communities in which they are situated.
Thank you for that. And final clarification, the motion that was approved that you referenced by the OCDSB Board of Trustees on June 24th, 2021, what are the clauses that are in conflict with the motion that is being put forth?
We were asked to, so if I'm not sure if Manager Guthrie would be able to pull that up for us. Perfect. But to my understanding, and let me be clear, I appreciate the intent of the motion. I strongly believe that this is something that we as a board need to discuss. However, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just gonna cut you off there. In the motion that was passed in June 24th, 2021, there is clause A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H.
I believe in regards to clause D.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. If we're able to get that up, I'd be able to speak to it more clearly. Sorry, I apologize for that. As well, if we're going through, so while we're waiting.
No, here it is right here.
Okay,
again, the clarification question that I asked was which are the clauses that you're referring to that conflict with the current motion?
I don't believe that that the scope of that work has been completed, or if it's even been started, or what the status is of that work at this time.
Okay, so it is with regard to D, and you also mentioned fulfilling our obligations with regard to the motions that were put forth. Is there any other that is in here?
Well, there was also the one thing I was referencing was a motion that was brought forth last committee, May 10th, 2022. So from my understanding of our board policies of Kern King, and then going to Robert's Rules of Orders, if nothing substantial can be found, that if a motion has been brought forward, and temporarily disposed of, it would prevent us from further discussion unless it's been brought back to the table. Considering this motion is, considerably the same in essence as the prior motion, I don't believe it would be in order for us to discuss it based on our board rules and governing structure.
Thank you, Trustee Presley. I have consulted quite significantly on board procedure and protocol with the staff, and I will determine that your point of order shall be upheld for the following reasons. A motion can be called out of order if it conflicts with the bylaws and standing rules. A motion can be called out of order if that motion conflicts with a motion previously adopted. And number 4, motions that present substantially the same question as one that has been temporarily but not finally disposed of i.e. lies on the table in the hands of a committee due to be presented at a later date or is subject to a motion to reconsider, can also be called out of question. And finally, on my determination, I think you've clearly outlined the issue of harm, reputational harm and harm to the community. So that will be my ruling that this is upheld and it will not be considered.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yes, Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's nothing in my motion that stops the clause that was up there about that. And
sorry, Trustee Blackburn, we're now on to a vote. There's not, unless of course, a vote on my ruling. So, oh, okay. So I guess that is my ruling unless there is a challenge.
Okay, so, but on a point of order, I would respectfully submit that it's inappropriate to suggest that a trustee has put forward a motion that is going to cause harm. I'm actually trying to stop harm by my motion.
I'm sorry, Trustee Blackburn, your point of order has to be aligned with our rules and regulations.
Madam
So
Chair,
if you'd like to challenge my
I would
ruling.
like to challenge your ruling.
Please go for it.
I think the people of Ottawa have a right to know where their trustees stand on this matter, and for us not to vote.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Blackburn. With that, we will then call a vote on whether or not the ruling of the chair is upheld. Those that support the ruling vote affirmatively. Those that are opposed to the ruling vote in the negative.
Madam Chair, I'd like
And
a
so-
recorded vote, please.
Point of order. Can you explain your ruling? And then can you explain what we're voting on so that everybody is clear?
Yes, I can do my best to do that. So Trustee Presley has brought forth a ruling to a point of order that calls for the question to be ruled out of order based on numerous clauses that a motion can be ruled out of order. And I have named those and I will rename them. Motions that conflict with the bylaws and standing rules, which she has outlined. Motions that conflict with a motion previously adopted, and motions that present substantially the same question. And because of those reasons that she has presented, I am upholding her point of order. And so that is my ruling that and so therefore we have called the question.
Would like a recorded vote.
Trustee Blackburn, would you like to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like a recorded vote.
Okay. We can have a recorded vote. Trustee who?
May student trustee Abdelhamid and I request a non-binding vote, recorded vote.
Yes. Again, is everyone clear on how your vote will be counted? Trustee Aziz?
Just to clarify, we are voting on the challenge on the floor.
Yes.
On your ruling.
Yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Scott?
Thank you. Again, just in the interest of clarity, a point of order has been raised and you are ruling that the motion that is included in the agenda, it would be out of order.
Yes.
So the question that we are voting on is whether or not we uphold your ruling as the chair.
You've got it. And just to clarify one more time before we do the recorded vote, you're ready for the recorded vote? Great. Those who support the ruling vote, those who support those who support my ruling will vote affirmatively. Those that are opposed to my ruling will vote negatively. In favor or opposed?
First, a non-binding vote, student trustee, and then you'll have to redo it again.
Okay.
And for everybody, for everybody else's benefit, in the rules around an appeal to the chair doesn't vote and is deemed to have voted in favor, i.e. the chair can't vote against their own ruling. And the motion, unlike other motions, does not fail on a tie.
The decision is upheld on a tie or a majority of votes cast. That is correct. Thank you.
Trustee Milburn.
Affirm.
Trustee Lee.
Against.
Trustee Lyra.
Affirm.
Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Affirm.
Trustee Dixon.
Nay.
Trustee Jenikins.
Against. Nay.
Trustee Scott.
Oppose.
Trustee Aziz.
Affirm.
Trustee Blackburn.
Opposed.
Trustee Nash.
Abstain.
Trustee Presley.
Affirm.
Student trustee Yu.
Affirm.
Student trustee Al-Delamy. Thinking she's not online. Student trustee Al-Delamy.
Hello?
Student trustee. Go ahead, student trustee Al-Delamy.
Affirm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have, including you, the ruling is upheld, the non-binding vote with 6-7, including the chair in favor and 5 opposed. The 2 student trustees also in favor. I'll now move to the binding vote. Trustee Milburn.
Affirm.
Trustee Lee.
Against.
Trustee Lyra.
Affirm.
Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Affirm.
Nay.
Trustee Dixon. Trustee Jenikins.
Against.
Trustee Scott.
Oppose.
Trustee Aziz.
Affirm.
Trustee Blackburn.
Opposed.
Trustee Nash.
Abstain.
Trustee Presley.
Affirm.
And again, that is
in favor, with including the chair.
So thank you. That looks as though the chair's ruling has been upheld. So we will move on to agenda item 8.5, notice of motion regarding Ottawa-Carleton. I now call upon Trustee Evans to introduce the notion of the notice of motion.
Hello, everyone. So as some of you may recall, the Ottawa-Carleton Educational Space Simulation is a thing that happens in one of our schools. There have been some operational concerns about the program, some health and safety concerns about the program, and it's currently slated for demolition. It's a custom-built space that exists in one of our schools. It took more than 10 years to build, and currently it is slated for removal. Some of you who were here when we had the award ceremony had the opportunity to meet the teacher who has volunteered to run that program for a number of years, and it's currently at risk of closure. This motion simply instructs that the space not be moved or demolished until the health and safety concerns can be met, can be overcome, to make sure that that program has a chance to continue. It's a really unique program. I invite all of you to take the teacher up on the opportunity to go inspect the space and look at and hear what it has to do. It's something I haven't seen anywhere else around the district. And so there are spaces in that building for the program that it needs to expand. I had a conversation with Manager Ostapachuk about how there are other spaces in the building. They're perhaps less conveniently located. They're not right beside the program that's looking to expand. But this is a custom-built space that the organization can't afford to rebuild. And so this motion, like I said, just seeks to make sure that that space doesn't get demolished while those health and safety concerns are overcome. And I would encourage all of my colleagues to support it.
Thank you. I have so that serves as your introduction. Okay. I have Trustee Aziz and then Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Through you, Chair, if I may ask, so there's no other similar space or program at any other school board? Like, it's a very unique to the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board?
So based on my conversations with the person who runs it, there used to be others at other school boards that they had partnerships with. I don't know if any of those still run, but it's certainly unique within the district. So there aren't, and it's a custom-built space, so it doesn't move easily.
Fair enough. Thank you for answering the question. And as the daughter of a space enthusiast and someone who appreciates education about space, I think that this motion is completely fair, and I look forward to supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have the Education Director that would like to speak to this.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to clarify a couple of things. This is not a program. This is an initiative that started many years ago at a school. It's been unclear for several years whether this is a not-for-profit activity that happens at a site, not at the school that's held. It's definitely sponsored by or supported by an educator who's very passionate about space, and we appreciate the wonderful learning opportunities that have been created. But it occupies a space at 440 Albert, and there are a number of risk management concerns and occupational health and safety concerns that exist around this site. And so there are a number of questions about who actually would be responsible or whose ownership this is. It is my perspective, and I did advise the mover, that this is an operational matter that doesn't belong before the board. And I'm going to list for you some of the current fire code violations that we have concerns with about this site. So there are combustible materials on the wall which exceed 50% coverage. There's uncertainty about fire safety equipment being in good condition. There's concern about electrical rewiring done by non-certified professionals. There is concern about doorways and corridor access. There are concerns about ceiling tiles in place. There are concerns about separation walls. There are concerns about fire alarms. There is this concern about storage of materials. There's concern about asbestos in the ceiling, and any movement in the building involves ceiling tiles. There's concern about falls from heights. And I share all of these concerns with you because we have serious legal obligations around safety and occupational health and safety. And so the idea that we would pause this in order to remedy those concerns is maybe incomplete, because it is unclear who has ownership of the structure. But the structure can't be relocated without being disassembled. It can't come out of the room. So we have a business need for the space. It's possible that we could find alternate business room for the space, but who is going to do the work? The staff who have supported the program have supported the operation of an activity. It's not a program, sorry, of the activity. But who will be responsible for remedying it? Who will apply the safety things? How much money do we want to spend on this? Is it owned by us? If you look at the website, it's a not-for-profit organization. So there are lots of questions here that we have been trying to work through. The program didn't operate during COVID, and as much as it's afforded wonderful learning opportunities, this is not a program. It's an activity. It's a school level activity. It's not the kind of thing the board normally engages in. There's a number of very serious regulatory issues, and I think that we have some professional guidance about how we navigate those things. And I think that if we allow time for doing this, it's unclear who would do that work. So you need to understand that you're actually redirecting staff resources, and there are costs associated with that that are very unclear. So I just wanted to make sure people had a fulsome understanding of what it is we were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next on the list is Dr. Kaplan-Murth, Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. I'm trying to take off my doctor hat, but I am concerned about the health and safety issues here. And I think, I have had constituents who've reached out and said that that it's devastating to their children to not be able to participate in this activity. And that is very difficult. And I'm wondering whether we could get more information just in terms of whether like if this is truly a health hazard to either the children participating in it or to the staff who are working in it, then that worries me. And I wonder whether there could be some collaboration with the Science Museum in Ottawa. Montreal also has a space simulation program that maybe we could help to encourage students to participate in. If there's some other thing that we could offer that would be similar. So I want to support this motion, but I also have reservations in terms of the health and safety issues.
Thank you, Kaplan-Murth. I heard a couple of questions in there, and I think it's best to pass it over to you, Director.
I'm not sure I heard a question that was looking, so again, we've not explored opportunities for partnership with other entities. Again, we are not like the whole ownership and status of this is unclear. And so that's not entirely in our purview. But again, our understanding is the way the structure has evolved, it has to be disassembled to be recreated. If you go to the website for Space Sim, it talks about a not-for-profit entity. I'm not really clear what the status of that is, but certainly if those folks were interested in having those conversations, you know, that's a possibility. But again, we still get into concerns about if we have to disrupt ceiling tiles or other pieces to move it, there's still safety issues. So.
Okay, over to you, Trustee Presley. Unless, of course, Kaplan-Murth, you have any further questions.
I guess I'm still unclear as to, so if it's not a OCDSB entity, what is it that is our involvement? It's because we need the building that it's in. Is that correct? Or that we're worried that we're running this as an activity that OCDSB is endorsing, or what is our role here?
Well, that's part of what we've been trying to sort out. So I want to go back to the idea that, you know, in a time and place that this idea came to life, it's been running for, I think, more than 20 years, maybe longer. We lived in a world of different safety standards and expectations. And there have been different permission forms used, sometimes I think ours and sometimes others, permission forms. But I think that the expectation is that it's related to school and it's running as a school, like that it's a school sanctioned event. And so we incur liability with that. And we have these safety concerns about the structure. So that's where we're at. It hasn't been operating during COVID. We were looking to decommission the space and repurpose the space when we got into this conversation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Presley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I was going to ask a question of the scope of the work that needed to be completed, but based on the comments of the director, I think I have a fairly decent understanding of being someone who's worked in real estate for 13 years and ripped open walls and seen some of the problems that can happen in there. I really want to support this motion, but I'm also concerned about health and safety considerations.
Over to you, Trustee Scott.
Thank you. I have been around long enough. I remember the early days of the space simulation. And at the time, it was an initiative of a Lisgar collegiate teacher and students who were interested in space at that school. These are serious issues that staff are raising in terms of the safety concerns with the location of this setup for the activity. I had not previously looked at their website, but looking at it now, the website makes it very clear that it thinks of itself still as a student-run Lisgar club that does one 5-day mission a year. And the director has indicated it hasn't run any of its missions for the last several years because of COVID. There's no indication of how many students are actually being served by this. If in fact, as the website suggests, they are bringing students from other schools in, especially elementary age children, if there are health and safety concerns, that has to stop. I think without a ton more information about the practical aspects of continuing to have this space occupied and fixing the health and safety concerns, which could be quite costly from the sound of things. I just don't see any reason to be trying to consider approving this recommendation, because if the space is needed elsewhere, and since the simulation would have to be disassembled in order to correct the health and safety conditions in the first place, I think that there's no point in trying to simply save it in that space. If it needs to be redeveloped, then it could be redeveloped in a different space.
Thank you, Trustee Scott. I don't think I heard any particular question in your remarks, but I thank you for your remarks. Next, we have Trustee Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to literally agree with Nellie. And the fact that I remember couple of years back, we had almost the same problem at the Museum of Science. They had to close it down for quite a few years to actually redo that. And cost-wise, we're already in a tight budget, so I don't know where we'd actually find the money to even try to start the scope of work on that. So I wouldn't be supporting this until we get more detail about how much it's going to actually cost us.
Thank you, Trustee Dixon. Next on the list is Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So obviously the health and safety concerns are very serious. But the main reason why I won't support this is, as the director has stated, from a good governance perspective, this is not a good governance motion. This, in my opinion, this is a completely operational matter, which should never have been brought forward to us in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn. Next, we have Trustee Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question for the staff. I'm guessing that there's been no district staff oversight with regards to renovations or anything that's happened in that space over the years it's been running, and that's part of the issues that have led to the risk issues.
I don't know that I can speak to the nature of that. There definitely has been an evolution of the structure in the space. I don't know if either the superintendent or associate director wants to speak to how that's worked.
Superintendent Dua, would you like to come up to the table? If you don't want to, we can still hear you from behind the table.
Through you, Chair. I understand that the structure was restructured around approximately 10 years ago, where the board took the responsibility of building the structure, and then the team put the extra attachments to it.
Trustee Lee, any further questions?
Yeah. So as an aerospace engineer, this is obviously an area that's very dear to me. But also as a university instructor, and I'm sure my colleagues know how much effort and manpower it takes to run a lab with all the equipment associated with it. And I doubt that there has been the same level of oversight in this space. So given those issues with the risk and the liability to the board, even though I really would miss it and hate to see it go, given my background, I don't think this is something that we can safely do as a board.
Thank you very much, Trustee Lee, for your comment on people power and your other comments as well. I'm now going to pass it over to Trustee Jenkins.
Save the best for last? No, maybe. I'm a huge fan of anything space related, but as everyone has mentioned, the health and safety issues are prime consideration. I'm also, it is my understanding that the space is also may be considered for our Indigenous community. So I think the space would be utilized for our Indigenous community. I think the value there is no question. So I won't be voting in favor of this.
Trustee Aziz, actually, before I move over, I'm a first-time speaker, and as the area trustee involved in this, I would very much like for Trustee Nash to take over the chair role.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So I've received, I know we all say this around this table, but I've received tons of emails from people who have gone through this, I'm not going to call it a program, but have gone into this space and have followed and pursued a career in aerospace. This program has, I'm going to call it a program, this club has really shaped so many people and their stories, and the fact that they took the time out of their lives to say, this really, really matters is something that I cannot just sit here silent and not share with you. I wish I had thought to bring some of those voices in advance of this meeting. I do know through the great work of Superintendent Dua, keeping me informed on the happenings of this space, that at one point there was plans to bring this space to Lisgar. And so my question to you, Director, is are there plans to continue this collaboration? Is there a way for us to continue this collaboration and rebuild this space in a safe way?
Through you, Chair, thank you very much. Yeah, the initial plan was to relocate the space sim to Lisgar, which made sense because majority of the students that took part were Lisgar students, and it would be easier for the school to monitor it. However, the space sim as it stands right now, its size does not fit into any space that we have available at Lisgar. We have looked at opportunities at other schools that might be interested in taking on the challenge. It's just trying to find a location that caters to both the students that are interested and also to fits the space sim itself. As it stands right now, another challenge that has happened is that this year, only students from Lisgar are taking part. If it becomes a board initiative or board activity, then it'll have to be a location where other students would have access to. And it also has to be a question about who would be responsible to supervise it if it's at another location and it's catering to students from all over the board.
Thank you for that response. If it was up to me, I would have asked for staff to seriously consider. This is one of a kind. This doesn't exist anywhere else from the messages that I've received. I would strongly recommend to staff to work with, and given that this is an operational issue, I would strongly recommend to staff to work with this partner, to work with the gentleman who won the chair's award just a couple of weeks ago for this great work, to bring it into a new space and to support our students in the OCDSB to gain this very, very unique experience that has shaped their many, many, many people's lives. And so with that, I hear that Trustee Lyra is asking for a further assessment of the safety concerns to be addressed. I do support that a further assessment that will help us to determine the way forward. I will be supporting this. Because I think we need to do some more work to ensure that this unique opportunity is upheld for future generations. That's it for me. Thank you.
You're taking back the chair?
Yes, with pleasure. Second time speaker, Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I want to just clarify some of the comments I'm hearing from staff and from colleagues that the space is both unsafe, but also available for Indigenous students at the same time, or that it's unsafe and the board wants to take it over anyway and use it, or that it's unwilling to assess the health and safety concerns for the continuation of this program. I just want to make clear the health and safety concerns and/or potential for the space to be used otherwise.
There are health and safety concerns. Some of the health and safety concerns date back many years. The structure is inside a room. It occupies the entire room, well, space, let me call it space, not a room. It can't be removed from the room without being disassembled. It is unclear whether disassembly would involve moving of ceiling tiles and other things that might be asbestos containing, and so there's additional requirements on that. I don't know the answer to that. I just know it as an identified concern. And the space is adjacent to one of our Indigenous education programs. And since we've not been able to address the health and safety concerns of the structure, the recommendation was the structure be taken down and the space be repurposed for the Indigenous education program. There are other spaces in the building that, as has been mentioned, but for the Indigenous education program expansion, but those spaces are in the basement of the building and aren't a suitable learning spaces from our perspective.
Trustee Aziz, does that clarify, or would you like to?
I'll leave it there, but I want to clarify that supporting this motion is not supporting that the program continues right now, but that we support that the safety concerns be addressed, whether or not that means the simulation itself be moved after the health and safety concerns are addressed, or once we get a more fulsome report on understanding how it can be either moved to Lisgar or used for a different space. I'm hearing a lot of, we don't really know yet, and potentially looking at the health and safety. We don't know, we're guesstimating that there's asbestos. We're guesstimating that demolishing it would create health and safety concerns. And so I'm supporting this because I would like to know more about what the space could be and what the next steps could be. Thank you.
So just to clarify on the question, I want to come back to the first health and safety concern, and that's the fire code violation. Combustible materials on the walls exceed 50% of the coverage. So straight out, the structure contravenes the fire code regulations. So the structure as it is in the room is problematic. So we can do all of the reporting back that you like. And to be clear, we are redirecting people who don't run this program. So think about what it is you don't want us to do while we're investigating this particular activity and reporting back to tell you that the structure itself covers the walls with exceeding the fire safety standard. So, I said I didn't believe this was a matter before the board because the board doesn't normally decide on the application of safety codes and other things in schools. That's a responsibility that's entrusted to us. Today, we spent quite a bit of time working on a procedural update that has taken quite a number of months of work with the Ottawa Fire Service about what our responsibilities are for fire safety plans. That's complicated work, requires a lot of thinking. We have to report detailed fire safety plans. There are students who spend the night in this structure. We need to have spaces. Like if we have students staying overnight in a space, we have to be confident that that is a safe space. And what we are saying is it is not a safe space for that kind of activity, and it does not meet our statutory obligations. And so we can talk about a higher threshold of risk, but this is a level of risk that we don't think it has been in place. I've talked about that. We've been trying to navigate through this. The superintendent has talked about some of those things. This is not about the learning value or the innovation or the dedication or the benefits that have come from it. It's about how we navigate our responsibilities for dealing with health and safety and meeting those legal obligations.
Madam Chair, point of order. Given the director has explicitly stated this is this space as it currently stands is in violation of fire code, which are statutory requirements, would this motion not be out of order given that it's currently as is in violation and requires to be remedied anyway?
I would need to call a recess to find the actual place within our procedures where that would be called, because I didn't look up that one beforehand. So would you like to have a point of order from which you would like to look up which clause?
I guess if the director wants to.
I think it's the choice of the board as to our committee as whether you take a procedural approach or whether you deal with the main motion. I think I've been clear about what our position is in terms of safety, and it's my perspective that the safety of students and staff is our priority.
Okay, if our procedural guru says that it's up to them, I'll withdraw the point of order.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe I'm now moving over to Trustee Lyra for wrap up. Nope, she just said no.
So we talked a little bit about risk and health and safety. We let our kids play football and they come away with concussions. We let our kids play rugby and they come away with broken arms and twisted ankles. This is a science program. It has a lower general risk in science than we might see in sports. But because there's a little bit of risk, there is some risk associated with this. All of a sudden, that's too high. It's too much risk. I'm disappointed that we seem to have different standards for sports activities and for science activities. Perhaps it's because society is more understanding of sport. There's a longer tradition and history of sports activities than there are of science-based activities with a modicum of risk. But I think that if we're willing to think about it and we're willing to consider, this motion is not saying ignore the health and safety concerns. This motion is saying don't demolish 10 years of work while the health and safety concerns are addressed. I'd like to see this program continue, and I don't think it will if this is demolished. It took 10 years to build the structure, and according to, I believe, Superintendent Dua, we built the last structure. I know we've heard that we're in a tight budget situation. We're not building a new one. And so, or I don't think we have the funds to build a new one. And so this program dies if the structure goes with it, I believe. Those are my thoughts. And so I want this program to continue because I think it has a lot of value. We heard that the academics and the learning opportunities and the innovation is not up for discussion right now. The only thing that's being discussed is the health and safety. And this motion says, don't destroy it while we address the health and safety instead of destroy it and the program dies. That's all.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra. And with that, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Any abstentions? That does not carry. Okay, so hold on to your seats, folks. We've got a few other things to get through this evening. We are on to the report from statutory and other committees, starting with PIC. I will call for a mover to receive the report of the Parent Involvement Committee from April 12th, 2023. Trustee Nash, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. I will now call a mover to receive the report of the Indigenous Education Council from the 13th of April, 2023. Trustee Scott, you are moving?
Receipt.
Okay, you'll take receipt. Thank you. Are there any errors or omission? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. I will now call for a mover to receive the report of the Special Education Advisory Committee of 17th April 2023. Trustee Dixon, are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you very much. That is carried. Now on to a mover to receive the report of the Advisory Committee on Equity from April 27th, 2023. Trustee Kaplan-Murth, thank you very much for moving. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you very much. That is carried. On to, I'm going to call for a mover to receive the report of the Special Education Advisory Committee from May 3rd, 2023. Okay, so Trustee Kaplan-Mark, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions? No? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. I now call for a mover to receive the report of the Audit Committee from May 17th, 2023. Trustee Milburn, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Next, we have information items. Over to Trustee Scott or Trustee Jennings to provide an OPSPA report if required.
I don't have any additional.
I think only that the Ontario Public School Boards Association did hold its annual general meeting. And the leadership, the presidents and vice presidents are continuing the same because they were elected for a several-year term the last time. In terms of the regional vice presidents who chair the regional councils, in the case of Eastern Regional Council, which is the one to which the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board belongs, Trustee Susan Humphreys from Renfrew County Board was acclaimed and has returned as the vice president who chairs the Eastern Region. And Karen McGregor as vice chair was also acclaimed. And I was elected as as one of the Eastern Region representatives to the education program work group.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Trustee Scott. Now over to you, Trustee Lee, for an OSTA update.
There's no public updates for the Ottawa Student Transportation Authority at this time.
Great. Now we've moved on to the part of the agenda for new business information and inquiries. I am going to, as chair, request that our director this evening speaks to the roles and responsibilities of trustees when it comes to decisions that have been passed by the board and when they are speaking publicly about that. I believe that can be found in our code of conduct. Director Giroux.
Sorry, I'm just looking. There is a provision in the board governance policy. I just was looking for the specific language. But essentially what the language is in the policy is that board members are responsible for upholding the decisions of the board. And I'm sorry, I haven't found the exact reference, but it is somewhere in the governance policy.
And so would you be able to speak to what that translates if you should decide to speak to the media? I know that it is in fact on decisions of the board, it is the chair that is the spokesperson for decisions of the board. But if another trustee does happen to speak to an issue, what would they have to take into account when speaking about a decision of the board that potentially they were not in agreement with?
Again, sorry, I don't have the specific reference in front of me, but the general provision is the chair is the official spokesperson for the board on matters that are before the board, is I believe the language in the policy, and that trustees are responsible for upholding the decisions of the board. And so 3.3, I'm looking at the governance policy and I think that reference might be.
I think Nicole has it open.
Through you, Madam Chair, our recently approved Code of Conduct policy at section 330 states that the chair of the board is the official spokesperson of the board to the public. No other board member shall speak on behalf of the board or represent themselves as spokesperson for the board unless expressly authorized by the chair of the board. When individual board members express their opinions in the media, they must make it clear that they are not speaking on behalf of the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that clarification. I know that that was something that I had to take into account during my first year as a trustee. And so I hope that that is useful for those of us that are new around the table. And if there is no other business, this meeting is adjourned. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I'm calling it back. It looks like there was, is there another inquiry or business?
I wanted to ask, and this is not something that we would discuss tonight, but I just wanted to ask that the staff and the trustees consider working together to write a letter, maybe to OPSPA, to advocate for protests not to be allowed on school, in the vicinity of schools when those protests are hate-based protests.
Thank you very much. I'm going to look to my colleagues to consider that, and also to the education director, and not a false ending now. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. We have a strat plan. Go forth.